So a lot of when I speak to a lot of people, they don't really know what architecture is, or the pathway, or how long it is, and what happens at each step. So I'm gonna use my experience and my knowledge to educate everyone on the pathway into architecture. So the first bit is, and the really important thing is, you don't need maths or physics to come into architecture. And I really need to kind of throw that out of the water. I think to have a good knowledge of maths and physics is very important. But I think you've got to be quite creative, and you've got to love drawing, and you have to be really inquisitive about spaces and really love how buildings are made. And if you have those sort of key things down, you and choose relevant A levels, like art, and you can even do sciences if you want, but I don't think you need maths or physics to come into university. So just bear that in mind, but be creative is super, super important. So when you come into university, you do 3 years of undergraduate, and you do subjects like design, history. You do a bit of physics to understand how gravity works with certain materials. You do a bit of sociology to understand how humans interact within a space. You do a bit of psychology to understand how humans feel in a space. You learn presentation skills. You learn how to model make, because model making is a super important communicative tool for you to present at what we call crits. So these are just presentations where you talk about your project, and model making allows you to see your project in a physical 3-dimensional form. And graphic design, so how do you present your work in a really beautiful way that tells a story or a narrative slowly. So once you've done those 3 years, you go out for 1 year in industry. So what I also wanted to say is, if you do 3 years of architecture and just think, I don't know if I want to continue, like I that's what I want to do. Well, you can go into graphic design, you could go into furniture design, you can go into be a model maker, you can go into a making course, and you can even also do interior design as well, and like sort of work in an office and sort of build up your knowledge that way. But if you wanted to continue as an architect, you do 1 year, ideally in an architectural practice, but you can also work in an NGO. You can go work abroad like I did, and you can also work within a planning department. But you've got to do a minimum of 12 months, ideally, in this 1 year out in industry. Then you come back and you do 2 years of master's or postgraduate diploma. And in these 2 years, you learn more complicated design. You do urban studies, so you don't just look at a building, you maybe look at a city and understand how all of it works together, the roads, the landscape, the buildings, the different types of buildings between hospitals, schools, housing, community centers, sports centers, and you understand that in a whole urban context. You do a bit of master planning, which is very similar, and you develop your theory. You understand complex model making, so you'll really improve your model making skills, and you will improve your presentation skills to be able to talk about more complicated projects, as well as do a theory or a dissertation on a particular subject that's really interesting to you. So so you can have, after that, you go for another year of industry. So at this point, you might think, oh, okay, I really don't want to do architecture. I'm really excited to have completed my master's. Well, then you can go and do a PhD. You can be a designer within the architectural realm. You can't be responsible for building buildings, nor can you call yourself an architect. You can you can go into theory and go into writing, or you can even be an artist. The pathway isn't just architecture. You can sort of stop off at each point and do something else. But if you choose to continue to do architecture, you have to do a minimum, from your part 1 and your part 2, 24 months in an architectural practice. And so you'll be working on projects from the beginning. You'll be working on projects after it's gone into planning. So you kind of put it to the council says, yeah, you can build the building. Then you understand, okay, how do we start designing this building to be built? Then you understand how a building is built physically by going to the site. and then what happens when the project is finished. So then if you want to continue, you go back to university for another year whilst also still working at the same time. And in this part of going to university, you learn about law, you learn about business, how to set up your own practice, you learn about contracts, different contracts type with builders, with clients, you learn about professionalism, you learn about how to run a practice and how to run a project. And after that, you do a series of exams and an interview, and then hopefully you're an architect. And that's what I had to do. And because I absolutely loved being an architect, it was a whole journey, as I just told you, to become an architect. But when you finish, there are different avenues in architecture that you can go into. You can be a planner, you can go and work for the council and be responsible for understanding what buildings get built. You can be an urban designer. So what I said is you can look at a whole city and work with an amazing team and kind of discuss, well, actually, we need a few more schools in the city. And so you can work in that department. You can work for an NGO or a charity that works for more sort of building buildings in typically developing countries that require, say, schools, hospitals, and community centers. You can go and write about all the things that you love in architecture. So you can be a writer or a theorist. You can do what I'm doing now. You can teach architecture at university, and I really love it. You can be an artist, or you can go into project management, which means when the building is being built, you can organize everything that's happening and work with the architect and say, oh, actually, we need the walls getting built now, and then the roof getting built, and then we put the windows in, that kind of thing, as well as design management, which is, again, working with the project manager. So that basically summarizes the pathway into architecture for now. And hopefully that helps understand the industry a little bit more. And hopefully it's got you feeling like maybe architecture is something that you want to do. So thank you for listening. And if anybody has any questions, let me know.